Hey friends, welcome back to Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous. On this week's episode, I have a very special guest, my friend Stephanie, and we are talking Gentefied. Gentefied was released in February 2020 on Netflix. The show centers around three Mexican-American cousins and their struggle to chase the American dream. In the first episode, we learned the family taco shop is at risk because the family is late on rent. Their neighborhood of Boyle Heights is slowly being gentrified, and the community is struggling between survival and being pushed out. At times, the cousins' dreams threaten the preservation of their community. This show is a look at what it's like to be on the cusp of change and fighting to come out on the other side, the victor. And now, here we go to the show. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you here to talk about Gentefied.
Thank you for having me. This is my first podcast, and I'm really excited to be here and talk about a show that actually really hits close to home.
Yeah. So before we dive in, how did you find the show? It's for people who are listening, it's on Netflix. So I found it because Netflix was like, oh, we think this is going to be something you like. Good job, Netflix. It was.
So actually, I found it through my aunt, who happens to be really into shows like this, but also she lives in Pasadena. Her husband has experienced gentrification being from Highland Park in LA.
Gotcha.
So Boyle Heights and Highland Park are very similar, and they've gone through similar things. And I was drawn to it especially because of that, and because my significant other had lived in Highland Park, and he had taken me to a place called Echo Park. And Echo Park, like in the last couple of years, has gone through that. And we were talking about the neighborhood and where he lived and how much it's changed and how people are getting driven out of their homes. And so I thought, man, I really want to watch the show. And it was so good. After watching it a second time, like, even better.
Yes, I agree. For people who are listening who haven't seen the show, there's 10 episodes total. It centers around one family, a group of cousins, but they all have sort of their own storylines as well as their crossover storylines. Basically, the first episode is introducing us to the family, and we meet the characters Eric, Anna, Chris, and their grandfather, who they refer to as Pops, which I love because we do that in the Black community too. We call Grandpa Pops. I thought that was like a total Black thing, but I guess maybe that's just a grandpa thing. I don't know.
And they refer to him as Pops, and then they also refer to him as Abuelo, which, yeah, I mean, I feel like Pops is even that, like, him being in the United States is, like an easy way to call him. And I love that too. I really like that because it's easy to understand, and you know who he is, he's the matriarch of the family, right?
And he's got such a great personality too. So I'm not familiar with most of the actors in the show, and I'm very sad about that because they were all so good and were so committed to being the characters they play. So Eric and Anna the impression I got is that they've never left Boyle Heights. They've always kind of stayed and lived with their grandparents and were just really entwined in the community. Chris is a cousin who I got the impression that he wasn't raised there, but then he's finished school and has now come back to live with his grandfather while he's in transition between business school and trying to get into culinary school. Anna's an artist. Eric works at the taco shop that his grandfather owns. And so there's this like very interesting dynamic in the beginning, which I don't want to make assumptions about it, but I could relate to the whole, Chris coming back into the neighborhood and everyone sort of being not anti him, but just like, you're not one of us, but you're kind of one of us, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, totally. I think Chris's character is very much like anybody who's experienced like moving out and coming back to your home base and not being able to fit in anymore exactly the same way you did when you were a child because things have changed. And your cousins have experienced living there all their lives. So yeah, it's kind of, they always refer to him as the coconut.
Which I thought was interesting because I've heard that term, not just I've never heard that term within like the Mexican community. I've only ever heard it when people are like fighting about someone of Asian descent. That was a eye-opening for me, I guess. Like the term coconut being like brown on the outside, white on the inside actually could potentially work in more than one culture as a negative.
That's funny because I haven't heard it in that way. I've always heard it in like, you're a coconut if you're, brown on the outside and white on the inside, like for our culture, like we refer to people as coconuts. It's nice to know that it's not just used in one, community, it's used within communities. And so I think it's funny that they always refer to him as that. Maybe he didn't, and the thing you have to also think is like, he struggles with that identity because he so badly wants to belong now that he's back in Boyle Heights and he wants to fit in, and it's kind of hard for him to do that. And you see that throughout the show, and gets highlighted constantly.
Yeah, especially in the episode 9, Protest and Tacos, where they're a part of the food tour. So Anna is a lesbian and she has this girlfriend, Jessica, and we get this really great backstory about how they met in episode, I want to say it's episode 7. And so fast forward to episode 9, and Jessica is so upset about Mama Fina's taco shop being a part of the food tour because it's just bringing more gentrifiers into the neighborhood. What I loved about Chris in that episode is that he is so desperately trying to help his grandfather's shop stay alive. Well, and Eric, they're all trying to figure it out. And then you have people in the community who are telling them this isn't the right way to do it. You're doing it wrong. But then no one's really talking about alternative solutions to sort of help the taco shop survive.
Yeah, and I think in like going back to like episode 1, it's like you're seeing Eric and Chris, they have like this bad relationship just because they're both trying to help, like want to kind of sort of help, but it's just not happening, and like they can't get along. And it gets better with with each episode, but it's still like that identity crisis that Chris suffers with. And from the beginning, you realize, you get introduced to where he works, and he works for a white man. All the Latinos around him that's the story of fine dining especially in California. It's, you go to these fancy restaurants, and even though he's the coconut, he still falls into the category of the Mexican cook. And they're always under the hierarchy of a white man, like it's always the rich get richer and the poor stay where they're at. And you see that just within that community, so I think Chris's character is really key in this storyline, because he was gentrified, he moved out, but then now he's struggling to come back and fit in.
Yeah, by the time you get to episode 8, you kind of I didn't forget about the restaurant, but you've grown with him beyond that. And you're right, in the beginning, it's just the guys in the kitchen with him are just kind of like, they like tease him all the time, and it's funny, but you can see it in his face that it hurts a little bit because he doesn't see himself. Well, he kind of does see himself differently, but then at the same time, he's still like, I'm one of you. He's always got this sort of I want more tone to him, like with his desire to go to cooking school or excuse me, culinary school. Especially when he's like, working for this guy, he's got Michelin stars, which is huge in the restaurant world, but at what sacrifice? Because that guy was not a good guy. He was so mean to the staff, and he was very racially prejudiced. When you get to the episode where he finally sort of loses it, where Chris finally sort of not loses it, but I guess you can kind of say he loses it.
I mean, we've all been there, right? Where you're like, you reach your breaking point, there's only so much you're willing to take, especially when there's a lot of those racial slurs that were being brought out. Like there was a point where he said, and I wrote it down, the chef says like, oh, these people don't have papers, I can call ICE on them.
Right.
And that's such a trigger in our community. Like these people are trying to make a living, and even though Chris struggles with his Mexican identity, he identifies as Mexican and he knows that this is a struggle, especially knowing, I think, that Pops is an immigrant, like you're always going to stand up for your family. And I feel like he almost felt like his kitchen family, the cooks that, they never get that name of chef, even though they're the ones doing all the cooking. The cooks, they're all like the grandfather, they're immigrants. Like somebody needs to be standing up for them. And that's where I think like it was so heartwarming to see that he, although he struggles with it, like he still knows what's right and what's wrong, and how people should be treated. Because, and this is going to go segue into another conversation where Anna's mom, she doesn't want to stand up for herself at work.
Yeah.
Somebody else has to be the voice of reason, and Chris was the voice of reason for these people. Like somebody needs to stand up for them.
Yeah, that's a really good segue into Anna's storyline. So Anna's an artist, which being an artist myself, that's a very our culture doesn't really like the struggling artist. We really like the whole like you're successful, so now we can support you sort of narrative. So she's struggling to make her artwork. She's working at a bar. She's got this girlfriend who's a social activist, and then her mom is literally working day and night after hours after her shift is done to support the family. So last year when I watched the show and it dropped, it didn't like, I felt for Anna a lot, because it was just like, man, trying to make your art successful so hard. I can't imagine, I already know what it's like when you have family members who don't, or friends who don't fully get it, but I can't imagine what it's like for your mom to not get it. But then this year when I was rewatching it in preparation for our conversation and watching her mom, that episode where her mom is, you see her working, she has to go to the bathroom and her boss is like, it's not time for a break, you don't get to have a break. The ache of her wanting, like you could see that she wants more for her life, and so trying to balance how she can achieve that, but then also seeing her daughter sort of feeling like her daughter's not contributing to the household. So I'm rambling. All this to say, it's very common when you're a creative artist person that your family is going to be like, you're not doing enough to contribute to the household. But then you add the layer of, Beatrice is literally working herself to death in the garment industry. And she's so then you have the immigrant component too. Like, what are her limitations because of where she is and where she lives? The way it's creating a conflict between mother and daughter.
Yeah, there's the gallery scene at the very end where the mom is seeing like her daughter's art, and it's almost like full circle. She gets to see that her daughter is trying to make it, and she says something about, I think I wrote it down, was like, I thought you were going to paint me in this light of angry and yelling.
Yeah.
But she sees her mom as joyous and a person who's worthy,
Yeah.
And that's the thing that, during the show, and you see like the struggle that they have as a mother-daughter relationship. But within our families, we're so close-knit that like she never once, like, she threatens to kick her out, but she never kicks her out.
Yeah.
She acts like she's not supportive, but it's just this facade that they have, the mom feels like she has to keep up with, like, I still have to be a mom. But no matter what, the love is there. She has a love for her kids, and Anna loves her mother, and Anna wants to be able to be a good daughter, but also is struggling to help her mom because art is there, but it's not, it's not financially giving her much, And I really like that Anna in her art, like in the first episode, she has, she kind of gives you a little bit of foreshadowing with her art. There's a piece where has all these for rent, for lease signs.
Yes.
And I was like, this is what we're going to focus on. This is, now that I see it, I'm like, it does foreshadow what happens and what's happening throughout with Mama Fina.
Yeah.
And she's highlighting the struggle of her community, and I know that it gets hard with her and her art, but she's really trying, she's trying to connect like her passion, but everything that's happening around her.
Mm-hmm.
Her art reflects her community.
Yeah.
And that's even another struggle because she wants to highlight all this stuff, but to what cost,
Yeah.
And I love her character in this because it does show you the perspective of being an artist, especially somewhere where you would think, Boyle Heights in LA, like you'd think that this is where all the artists go. And
Mm-hmm.
she is the title of a struggling artist in
Mm-hmm.
somewhere where you think you'd have so much opportunity, but even as a brown woman, she's still struggling.
Mm-hmm. And then when Tim, who is this, I mean, for lack of, I mean, call it what it is, he's a total gentrifier, coming in and buying properties, he discovers her at this party and is just like, you're so amazing, and gives her that boost of confidence that it's not that she's craving it, but she definitely isn't getting it in the way that she wants it from her family. Like, yes, they love her and support her, but they're not praising her overtly all the time. And so here's Tim, this curly haired white guy with beads around his neck, who's like, all about queer allyship. And so it's putting her in this position of like elevating her in her art and giving her the space to have her voice. But it comes at a price. The scene where with Ophelia, and he has purchased the building that the convenience store is located in, and he hires her, Anna, to do a mural on the building. And then we later learn that he never discussed it with the person who actually owns the business. And so just seeing the devastate, like you can see it in her eyes that she feels like Anna feels like she's been betrayed by Tim, but then also she's betrayed her fellow neighbor because she didn't know that she wasn't looped in. And then when she tries to fix it with the, what do they call it? The shop, kind of like a cash grab, if you will, like where everyone comes in and buys all the stuff to like help her so she doesn't lose the business based on the mural that, and I don't want to give away what the mural is because I want people to watch it because it was like a really beautiful moment to like that moment where she unveils it and she and her girlfriend have like this really beautiful moment in that. But then, Anna tries to fix it, but then it's still just doing more harm. And then when Ophelia just kind of like checks her in a way of like, this is my business and no one's including me in on the conversation, like that's not okay, I cried.
Yeah, it's emotional. It's like there's so many emotions going on because you feel for Anna, you feel for Ophelia, and I know that Anna is trying to do the right thing, but Ophelia feels, like you said, left out. I mean, they do that cash mob.
Cash mob, that's what it's called. Thank you.
I just remembered what it was called, but yeah, they do the cash mob, and it almost feels like she said, like, I'm not running my business. In a lot of those mom and pop shops, they've been there, they're institutions, they've been there for so long that they have regulars and they're okay with their regulars. They're not in need of having these cash mobs. And it's hard to understand from an outsider perspective. It's like, oh, I'm doing a good deed, Anna's like, yeah, I'm going to bring in some revenue. But for her, she says, I like my borrachos, which are my drunk people, will come my regulars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it is, and she does. We struggle with change, especially in those types of situations where it's already there. It's been there for many years. They have their way of doing it. They make ends meet. There's no need for a change per se.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with nowadays. Anybody who has had an establishment for many years, it's the change is not something that we're willing to take in just yet. It might take some time, and that doesn't say that Ophelia doesn't understand that Anna is trying. It's just at what cost. It's hard. I think Ophelia does a really good job of standing up for her, and that's hard for somebody who has set in their ways, and you can tell she's pretty set in her ways. But when there's a drunk guy that comes in that episode, and he calls her a Mari Macha, I believe that's what she calls her, and that is a lesbian, and she's a lesbian, yeah, like that's who she is. But people don't go around the street calling me heterosexual. Like that's
Right.
not the way you do it, right? And so you
Right.
calling her out like that, Ophelia knew he was in the wrong, and she's
Yeah.
like, get out of here. So that's heartwarming, because although all this chaos is happening, I'm still going to defend you. You're still my neighbor. You're still my community. So it's
Yes.
me.
And that part, and that her doing that, it hit my heart in a way where it was just like, she's still so understanding about community and supporting community, and the younger generation is trying to figure out what their balance is, right? Like they're trying to figure out, I love my community, but how do we still survive? How do we survive gentrification? And just seeing an older woman, because a lot of times it's the older generations that don't fully understand like
Mhm.
identity in that way, and also seeing this older woman sort of be like, no, you don't get to talk to somebody like that in my store, get out.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's like,
I
get
value respect still, and with Anna's character, it's like a breath of fresh air to see that her whole family never once questions her because she has this because she is lesbian. And
Mhm.
sometimes in within the Latino or Mexican community, that's frowned upon because it's not normal for people, because that's what they think is not normal. The older generations, and I'm not trying to group them all together, because a lot of
Right.
people have opened their mind up to being more acceptable of the community. But I love that that's never been brought up. Like
Mhm.
even within her mom, they have this strange relationship. The only thing that I did pick up on, and it was in the first episode, is, and I have to say it, the way that the mom said it and I wrote it, was she called Jessica,
Mm.
Anna's girlfriend, negra encimosa, which
Mm.
means a black girl that's like pretty much always here, like she's always a burden almost. That is racism within our own people. Anna might struggle with that, but her mom never once calls her out on anything else.
Right.
And her and grandpa, their pops doesn't either. Nobody else. Everybody is very accepting of who she is, and
Mhm.
I could appreciate that, because there is so many people out there within our communities that they're not accepted, and it makes her character that much more stronger, and that's why she carries herself the way she is. She has a lot of people supporting her, and I
Mhm.
think the show shows you that they all support each other in one way or another. They're a community.
Yes. Which was why the Tim character was so frustrating for me, because he was kind of forcing Anna into this allyship of and yes, be allies because you're both in the LGBTQ community. That's great. You understand each other's struggles in that respect,
Yeah.
but he wasn't able to put himself in her position in the sense of with empathy, in the sense of she's not just a queer woman, she's a queer brown woman, so there's more to it. I think at one point he's like something to the effect of like, gays got to stick together, when they're at her art show in the later episode. And I
Yeah.
had this moment watching that where I was just like, it's not that simple for her. It's not that simple for her. She is a brown woman in a world that already undervalues brown women, that already undervalues artists. And now you're like sort of forcing her to ally with you because you're both in the LGBTQ community. You're not embracing the fact that she's brown, you're tokenizing it.
Yeah, and like that's a perfect segue to what I was just gonna say, is that in that episode when he's talking about her, he starts saying, "Oh, her mom lives in a sweatshop. Oh,
Yes.
grandpa." I don't know if he says this, but he starts like talking about all these things that she is like,
Mm-hmm.
more like, oh, let me, like you said, tokenize on the fact that her mom is an immigrant. They're low income. Like I don't know exactly how it was said, and I mean that's why you have to watch the show, because it just you'll see that, and it's happening. It happens so much more than we think. Like people find a way to market the fact that you are a minority, and oh, she has a story to her. Like how about we don't highlight those things it's not, everybody has a struggle. Let's highlight
Mhm.
the fact that she is making it as an artist, and
Yes.
she's proud of who she is and everything that she's overcame. You have to, if he wanted to do it that way, it's just the way he framed it. And he was talking to this woman who is a real estate agent. He's just like, oh, and she did this and like all the bad things, but like make
Mhm.
money off of it.
Yes, that's exactly, and that's why Tim's so icky. He's so
Yeah,
icky.
I mean, he needs to be part of it because this is happening, and it brings up a new light. But yeah, he was one of those characters I really struggled with.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When he
Yeah,
when he
and
first showed yeah, when he first showed up and he's like, make me a some kind of
Mayan
Mayan
princess.
princess. And I was just like, oh, okay. I wondered when this character was gonna show up. Or
Yeah,
like,
and he like tries to do, at that scene where they're at the party where Tim and Anna like even they increase like they're not increased, but their relationship gets stronger because of this. This is where money starts coming into play.
mhm,
He's dressed like the Mayan princess
yeah.
or whatever, and I was like, way to show cultural appropriation right there. Like, let me, look this certain way because that's gonna be, that's cool. That's the cool thing to do.
Right.
Really, is
Man.
that what do you really know what you just dressed up as? Let's be more culturally aware of things, not
Yes.
appropriate it because you're the white man and,
Right.
oh, I'm doing something cool.
Yeah, it's unique. I'm different. I'm different because I can be, part of it, but then also you're part of the problem. Like,
Yeah.
Tim, you're the problem. There was an interesting because so Anna meets Tim at this birthday party where she's face painting. And then what struck me about her storyline that is very universal for artists is that when she goes to get payment and the mom, and like it's this huge party, it's super elaborate for a child. Like, I can't. And so she goes to get payment and she's like, oh, we agreed upon X amount. And she's like, oh, like times are really tough right now. Like, you know what I mean? And then proceeds to like, in the background, this little girl's driving her, like, what is it? It's like a car for kids that can drive and it has all this like, fanciness to it. And she's like, times are tough. And Anna's just like, looking around, she's just like, okay, this is ironic because you're telling me that you can't afford to pay the agreed upon price, but you probably spent a couple of grand on this party without including the presents. That really
To get
just,
away with that because guess what? She's a struggling artist and
mhm.
uh
You
you
can't
know
afford a bad reputation. You can't afford a reputation of being difficult. And then when Tim shows up and is like, oh, I'll pay you $2,000 to paint this mural. And she's like, I'll do it for 3,000. I was like, yes, stand up for yourself. Tell
yeah,
that little, good for you.
negotiate. That no, I love that. I love that she did that because it shows you that we don't just have to accept what's being given to us like she did in the
Mhm.
party. Because in that part, she takes this gig on because her mom's like, hey, Anna, you need to bring some more money in. And she takes this, this isn't, face painting is not her real thing. She's an artist. She likes creating art,
Yeah.
and she gets paid in leftovers. And
Yeah.
like that was even a struggle, but she takes it because that's what we do. It's a necessity.
It's so
Um,
real. I
yeah,
was waiting for I was surprised they didn't try to bring in the, this is exposure because we hear that a lot in the artist community. Oh, it'll be great exposure.
yeah,
Okay, exposure doesn't pay rent, guys. But thanks.
yeah. I mean, that it's so true. It's like, oh yeah, internships, volunteer work, like
Yeah, do all this free labor that's never going to get you anywhere. Or it
yeah,
might. It
it
might get
helps.
you.
Yeah, it might help you, but it's almost that idea of like when she gets in with Tim, it's like who you know.
Mhm.
And that's what we're always told. It's about who you know.
Mhm.
And but what about showing who you are and the talent you can bring?
Yeah.
And that happens so much, not even within the even if you think about Chris, like that's why he was working with this chef. It's because
Right.
who you know.
He wanted that recommendation to get into culinary school.
Mhm.
Man, that guy was a tool. I hated that guy. I'm so glad he told him off.
Yeah, those two characters, there was two different types of characters, but they both were white men,
Mm-hmm.
successful white men.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? We have to kind of shut a better eye and be like, oh well, okay, I'll listen to them. But I'm glad that
Yeah.
they both stood up to them.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, they can do it.
Yeah. I love so so Eric and Chris, they always have the struggle in the beginning.
Yeah.
They're so cute. But I loved Eric and Lydia's storyline too, because I feel like Lydia is such a strong character. She like knows who she is. For people listening who haven't seen the show, Lydia is Eric's girlfriend, on again, off again girlfriend. And she's someone like Chris in the sense that she's left Boyle Heights. She went to school in Stanford and then she came back to do work in the community to help the community thrive. And so we find out in the first episode that they're expecting a child. And so just watching that sort of play out through every episode, their Pops loves Lydia. Her dad and he are good friends. Like this is just a very much like everyone's people are happy about this, but Lydia and Eric are trying to figure out how they fit now and what they want now. And Lydia's got life things going on that don't necessarily align with what everyone else wants, but I don't want to give anything away, but I just loved their story. I cried a
Yeah,
lot.
I did too. I was watching it last night, and the specific episode where they highlight them the most, and
Mm-hmm.
I was in tears. I was like, oh my gosh, this is rough. Like you said, we don't want to give too much away, but it's just life,
Yeah.
and things that you have to do, sacrifices you need to make. But their relationship shows you it's raw.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you that it does not always, rainbows and butterflies, and you're bringing in a child, and it's another layer of added stress. And like you said, she's successful, she has it going on, she's coming back and helping her community. And then Eric, he's struggling. He wants to help he wants to help Mama Fina become successful, and wants to make sure that Pop is okay, but he also wants to be the provider.
Mm-hmm.
With that, because I think he feels in a sense like that's like it for him. But when you see him, and as a character, you see that he really likes to read, and he's
Mm-hmm.
really smart. He wants to make sure his community is bettering themselves.
Yeah.
And I love that about him. It's like he always gets seen as a character who's kind of like, oh, this guy who's immature, doesn't know anything, but you're constantly seeing him read or
Mm-hmm.
shed a light on something. And like, I think there's an episode, with Chris and Eric, they always, argue about everything. And there's a time where they are trying to figure out how to help Mama Fina survive, and they're
Mm-hmm.
meeting up with the lawyer, and Eric had all the right questions,
Yes.
but Chris, being an outsider, is like, no, 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 like, don't ask those questions. And
Right.
then when the lawyer assures him that he's doing the right thing, he's asking the right question, I was like, yes, like somebody
Yeah.
saying that he's learning these things, he's smart. And I think Lydia sees that too.
Mm-hmm.
She sees that in him. Obviously she's a strong woman. She's pretty independent. So she's not just gonna be like, oh, it's fine, I'm gonna let you come into my life again. It's
Right.
okay, like, we're having a child. She believes in him though.
Yes. That's huge. And I think we really see how much she loves him in the scene where he's analyzing Anna's art. And she's like, what do you think Anna was thinking when she painted this? And he just got real deep. And
Mhm.
it was so beautiful hearing him express what his opinion was, not just because it was deep and thoughtful, but because he was also being kind of vulnerable in it too. And throughout the series, I thought he's just very much a man. He's got this very much like he kept saying that I'm a grown ass man. And we
Mhm.
get you're a grown ass man, Eric. but also maybe calm down a little bit because it's, you know, we all need to help each other. But when you see the way that Lydia is looking at him as he's talking about Anna's art and what he thinks it means, it was just like, I don't know. I don't know if it was meant to be like a super like sexy scene, you know, but to me, that was just so sexy to hear a man speak in that way with such vulnerability about something so meaningful. I was like, oh, good job, you guys. Why didn't they submit this for Emmy consideration?
It was really heartfelt. And you're like, yes, like Eric, you're doing it again. Like
Yeah.
you're making us fall in love with your character even more, you know? I
Yeah.
felt like a really like it was so heartwarming that scene, you know, like okay, like she's like, this is my man, you know,
Yes.
like he's smart, like yeah, like I see it. I like the episode too where he starts the little libro or
Yeah.
the libro you know, the reward system,
Yes.
and she's like all about it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we need, right? Like even though we're struggling and we're having a hard time, when somebody is there to back us up, it's like, oh, yes. And especially if it's like your significant other, it's like oh,
Mm-hmm.
even more, you know, acceptable and fun, you know.
Their relationship was, I think, we needed to see that kind of representation on TV because we see so much of couples who are pregnant and they're not married and their paths are kind of going in different directions, and they sort of like get written back into being forced into each other again. And what I love about Eric and Lydia is that the writers sort of leaned into the reality of their situation, but also helped this organic conclusion show up in the sense of like, because I don't want to give anything away, but in the sense of like, they at the end of it, they're loving and supporting of each other and they have this great respect for each other. I really appreciate that they sort of laid this footprint for people to see how it could be resolved in a positive way and everyone sort of is respectful and loving and supportive of each other. I thought they did a really good job without trying to give anything away.
Yeah, no, I think that they did a good job because they also show that they're a couple that struggles, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were in the beginning, you didn't even know if they were really a couple or what was
Mm-hmm.
going on, you know, and they shed some light on the fact that like they're not an Instagram family, they're not, you know, they're not this perfect family. We don't even know if they're family at this point in
Right.
the beginning. It's later on that you start seeing the development and other things, but I like that it's raw and I like that it shows you that it's not always rainbows and butterflies. Like Eric and Pops have a conversation about like, hey, you're gonna have a child.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need to grow up, even though you're a grown man, you need to grow up and you need to step up. And you know, Lydia knows she could be the provider on her own, but with some help, it could be good too. And I like that they do that. You know, they show you that yeah, it can be done on your own, but he's also the father, and Pops doesn't want you know Eric to go down the same path that you know his father went through, and we don't know a lot about that, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Eric has maybe something in his past that hopefully we find out in a second season, you know.
Yeah.
It's the way he is the way he is for a reason. And
Mm-hmm.
I like that Pops, you know, is always so supportive of all of his grandchildren,
Yeah.
all of them. He has his own struggles with his business, but he's always so supportive. And no matter what, he wants them to be happy. He wants them to be successful. And he's willing to do it at all costs, you know? So
Yeah.
it's nice that he's supportive of their relationship and wanting to make sure that no matter what, Eric is still a provider to that child.
Yeah. Which I
Yeah.
think contributes to Chris's sort of identity crisis because of the way that his dad sort of speaks about Boyle Heights
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
how
you
hard he's worked so he doesn't have to live in the ghetto. I think he says that a couple times in the
yeah, and you're
show.
almost curious to know like why doesn't he help Pops out?
Right.
He seems like he's a successful character, you know. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know him. We don't really know about him, but I always think about like what happened with him and Pops.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't he help Pops out? And I love the character of Pops, and I think that he struggles a lot throughout the whole series.
Yeah. So Mama Fina's, for those of you who are listening, is basically the taco shop he started with his wife. His wife is Delfina. We've learned that she's, in the first episode, we learned that she's no longer with us. And so the shop is just, it's not just his taco shop. It's also where he and his wife were happy and loved. And so I love how much they show in the beginning of like their relationship before she's dead, because
Yeah.
he's just this big, loving teddy bear. And it's just so sweet.
Yeah, it is. And I'm really happy they chose him as the actor.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit about the character, Pops, he's actually like an actor that has come out in like Spanish
Oh.
shows and stuff. Yeah, I have seen him. So he has played always like different types of characters, but I think this one, I think I've seen him in two different shows before, or telenovelas. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but
Mm-hmm.
I know his character is he's a seasoned actor, and I love that they bring him back. And his character, it just shows you that like he's so like you said, Mama Fina's is more than just a taco shop. It's
Mm-hmm.
it brings back good memories of him and his wife, and that's why he struggles with changing it, and he knows things need to change. And even though his grandchildren like constantly are telling him, like especially Chris, like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. I wanted to talk about Lupe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Lupe is the character, is a character that gets brought on in one of the episodes, and she is an owner of a botanica, which is like a botanical shop, and they have like a lot of different types of herbal medicines and things of that sort. And Lupe is a business owner who has experienced gentrification, and
Mm-hmm.
she actually has embraced it, and she has a successful career, and she has a successful business, and it's because she was able to modify it. Whereas when Lupe is an old friend of Casimiro or Pops, and she's very open to the idea of change, and she helps him feel more
Mm-hmm.
confident. And I love that relationship that they have, because this is a new, an older person friend for many years. Whereas like when you hear your young grandchildren telling you to change, you're kind of like, oh, a little hesitant. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have that character who kind of brings him to his senses and shows him that change is good. I know that we don't want to step away from the idea of like Mama Fina's and stuff, but just to make it successful, there's always that back and forth. Like, do I change it? Do I keep it? Do you
Yeah.
and
How do you grow and
she helps.
evolve?
Yeah, and she helps with kind of showing him the side of a successful business that has embraced change.
Yeah. I did really love her too. She had such a warmth about her that I think that just felt very universal, you know?
Yeah, she shed a different light on like life for him as
Mm-hmm.
well, because Pops is the caring grandfather, and he's afraid to let go.
Yeah.
And even though he's getting older, he's afraid to let go. But she tells him, like, what do you want to do? Like, he's like, I want to sleep more. And I want to be able to enjoy a day off. And those are things that help him, later on as a character with his grandchildren, like kind of see a different light and
Yeah.
what the potential Mama Fina's can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I just love him. His cowboy hat's so cute.
Yes,
Just love that.
yes. Everything
Oh.
about him, he's so like so real. Like I love that about him. Like even when he's in his home, like you guys will see that if you see the show. It's just you'll love watching it, and you'll be hooked on him because he's just such a good person.
He really is. Here's what I love. I love a well-acted show, right? When you forget that they're actors, you forget that they're pretending to be in this fake world. All of these characters are so convincingly real. while you're watching. That to me is the best thing about movies and television, is when you can put together a cast like that. And the folks who assembled this show did such a great job in that way, because you feel like Pops is your grandpa. You feel
Yeah.
like Eric and Anna and Chris can be your friends and or relatives. Like Lydia, you feel like you want to go and like help Lydia and Jessica and their causes. Like they did. And Nayeli, Anna's little sister, we didn't talk about her yet, but she's such a great little sister. The show does not get enough recognition. It did not get enough recognition
No,
at all.
it didn't at all. Like I have watched multiple shows on Netflix, and this is the one show that like I had to sit through the whole thing. And like I binge watched shows before, but this one was like the one that actually, like, I was watching it not because I wanted to know what happened at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the development of every episode. I didn't even really care if there was an end or not. I wanted to just keep watching because I laughed, I cried,
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the characters. Pops, I feel like he could be my grandpa. He reminds me of my grandpa. I think if I saw him on the street someday, like I wouldn't even refer to him as his name, because it's Pops. Like that's
Yeah.
who he is, He's
Yeah.
a really good character, and all of the characters are great. The show is one of my favorites. It hits close to home, but it's also just like feel good show.
Yeah.
Four
I
episodes too. So
Yeah. I thought it was really well executed in the sense that it's, very culturally specific, but at the same time, you still sort of, as a person who is not represented in this show as part of the culture, it's so effective in making you, the viewer, feel something.
mhm.
And that's just so important. I think that's such a huge part of being able to come into a situation and say, okay, so let's think about what's happening. Maybe I shouldn't be an asshole who's racially prejudiced. Not that I'm saying I am, but like when people say things, you're just like, okay, so you lack understanding. And this show, I think, helps highlight in a way that the theme of family first, the theme of love, the theme of gentrification, those things can have elements to it that are easily relatable if you were not coming from a Mexican background. And I think the producers of the show did such a great job of reminding everybody family is universal. The
Yeah.
commitment of family is universal. The balancing of family is universal. And so then they add the layer of, we have this Mexican family that is trying to balance everything. So you can relate to the family theme, and then you gain understanding because they're bringing in elements of the Mexican culture, of what it's like being Mexican American, being an immigrant, etc.
And I think also it's one theme that I saw, like a recurring theme, is food.
Mm-hmm.
Is the like that universal love language. Like that's what always brought them together, was like when they were at Mama Fina's, or there was like a time where I think it was Jessica and Anna and Chris and Eric and like one of their friends were all together, and they're enjoying food and your Mexican street dogs, and they're having a conversation, like a good conversation. I always think like food is always like a center of conversation, and their love for it. So I think that was another theme that I saw, and couldn't help but think about also like emotions that I brought up, and not only emotions but also like the way I see things. I was following the storyline, and sometimes I struggled with like, well, change is good, like, oh, I sided with Jessica in that sense of like, she was like, no, like we need to stick up for our community, and change. She's not saying change is bad, but it's just like, to what expense?
Right.
And so you struggle with a little bit of bias within the show,
Yeah.
and it's eye-opening. It's like,
Yeah.
now second time watching it, I'm more aware of things that both sides go through, and I like that it makes me aware of things that I might have just had like a total biased opinion on. Like,
Yeah.
it's important to open your eyes and reflect on what really is going on within these communities. It's a struggle of two tales. It's like, where do we fit in between, where the community is still successful but is also growing and thriving?
Right. I definitely related to Chris the most in the beginning because he's struggling with fitting in. He's struggling with how can I help? I've got all these ideas, and he's sort of bringing in ideas without listening to the locals, if you will. And then as the show progressed, I really started feeling Anna a lot because, again, the artist thing, you want your art to be your sole source of income. You want to be successful in that. And again, it's that question of to what cost. And Jessica really calls her out in an episode about it. What really broke my heart was there's an episode, I think it's called Brown Love. Yeah, episode 7. And Nayeli's doing this report for school about, love or whatever. And Nayeli asks, where do you guys see yourselves in 5 years? And Jessica's 5-year plan includes Anna. And then Anna's 5-year plan is all about her art. And that was just like me giving something away in the show, but but it hit in a way where you're just it's a pivot, right? Because sometimes artists forget to include outside elements into their plans because they've been surviving instead of thriving. So they're so focused on how can I thrive instead of survive that, we tend to forget to include other people in our plans.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
really like hit me like, oh, I've done that. Whoops. And
No,
so
I
to
think
see
a lot of
Jessica's
us have.
face, I was like, oh shit, that's how people feel when I say stuff like that. Oh man, I'm a terrible person.
Yeah, and it's not like you're not thinking about the other person. It's just that in that moment, where do I see myself? Like, I think we assume that those people are already included in that plan.
Yeah.
And so it is rough, it is rough to hear those kinds of things, and I guess in a sense you have to be like, oh, I have to be more aware of how I'm saying things.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe just make sure people know, like, you're in my plans. It's just, this is what I want to do for myself,
Right.
It's about personal growth as well, and I think that that's what Anna is highlighting, is like her personal growth and what she wants to do in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my assumption was that she was including.
Oh, that's interesting. Who was your favorite character on the show?
My favorite character, I mean, I liked them all, but I liked Lydia because I could really relate to her. I'm not
Mm,
a person who has children, but I just could relate to her because I have a really good relationship with my father,
mm-hmm.
and she had a really good relationship with her father, and her father is, kind of struggling with her like goals, her career goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I related to her because I have career goals and I have a really good, it's that family unit thing. When in a sense, I also related with Anna because she was always trying to help her mom. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the way that we are. We're always trying to help our families. And so that's why I was like, I related to those two characters and I really liked them both. But Lydia definitely was my favorite just because I could relate to her and the struggle of like hoping to reach some career goals, but
Yeah.
also thinking about your family. And she left once before and she came back. I mean, I did something similar. I left for college and I came back and I fit right back in because I lived here, but
Mm-hmm.
there's always like that need for wanting more and maybe
Mm-hmm.
going somewhere. I don't know,
Yeah.
I really liked her, but all the characters that were just like so great, like you
Yeah.
said.
What do you want to see in season 2?
I want to see the development of Lydia and Eric's relationship.
Yes.
I want to see how that goes.
Yeah.
I want to see where where
Mm-hmm.
his character goes because he's still struggling. And so without saying too much, it's like, what's next for him?
Mm-hmm.
It leaves in a really, I mean, I'm not going to give out what it
Yeah.
leaves on, but
Don't. Yeah.
because
Don't.
you need to watch it to understand it. And I want to see that. I want to see what happens. There's a lot of like cliffhangers. I will say that about this show. And then I don't want to give too much. This is why you need to watch it because season 2 is hopefully coming. And
It is. Netflix did announce there is going to be a season 2, but they haven't announced when. IMDb just says 2021. Well, it's April, guys.
okay.
Like, are you recording? Come on, I need answers.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see all of that and just in general, like what happens to some of the characters that get
Mhm.
highlighted and kind of get not, you know, they're not forgotten completely, but just like back and forth. I mean,
Yeah.
there's the mariachis that I wonder what's going to happen to the mariachi
Oh
group.
my gosh, we didn't even talk about that episode, girl. Oh my gosh.
That was rough. That was a rough one.
It really was. The episode is called The Grapevine. It's episode 6. And Javier is the main person in the mariachi band that we follow. And he has a son that's Nayeli's age. And so just, I'm like, how do we talk about it without giving too much away?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious to see like what's the development of that, the mariachi, and what
Yeah.
happens. And
We could
um
probably do a whole, I could probably do a whole episode on just that particular episode alone because there was a lot packed into episode 6, a lot. And I
mhm.
cried a lot. I mean, I just cried.
This show is like I said, it's full of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that I was going to be this emotional the second time,
Same.
but I got more emotional. Something we didn't touch on, and I really think it's important to highlight, is there was different types of Latinos, and
Yes.
you know, not only Latinos, they also talk about Erica. She's Dominican.
Mm-hmm.
And they all get, for whatever reason, we always tend to group everybody together who speak
Mm-hmm.
Spanish. And I love that Erica is still true to herself, and
Yeah.
she,
Jessica.
yeah, yeah, Jessica,
Yeah.
yeah, she's so true to herself. And you know, she continues on. She'll talk about, you know, a little bit of her being Dominican.
Mm-hmm.
And Norma, who's also a character, and she's the cook at Mama Fina's, and
I
she's
love her.
Salvadorian.
Yeah.
And then we have another chef or a cook in the first episode who is, I don't know, I don't remember if he was like Venezuelan or,
Okay.
yeah, and like everybody gets grouped, but I
Lumped
love
into
that they
one.
highlighted other Spanish speaking groups. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just like they're not all the same, you know, don't
Yeah.
put them all together. But I love that they shed a light on different cultures as well. Not a lot, but enough to where it's like all these people have their own struggles, and they're minorities and similar but different.
Bringing back Tim, there's a scene where Anna, and I forget who the third person is in the scene, but he basically refers to the two women as being exactly the same in terms of like where they're from or their background. And they
Yeah,
both at the same
Anna,
time, huh?
Anna and Ophelia.
Oh yeah, it's Ophelia. And they both at the same time like correct him and he just like brushes them off, like, blah, whatever. I know what's right. And it's like, no, bro, acknowledge that like these are two very different cultural experiences. Like you can't
Yeah.
mm,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, that's who you are, Tim. Still don't like you. I agree. I want to see Eric and Lydia in season 2 because the way season 1 ended, it's heartwarming. And we do have a lot of that happy ending stuff in Hollywood, even with serious stuff. When it comes to like pregnancy, there's always that happily ever after, but then we don't ever get the next chapter. So I would like to see what their next chapter looks like, especially with the way that ended. I kind of hope we meet Chris's dad.
I do too. He calls him El Cucuy on his phone, which
Yeah.
means like the scary guy, pretty much, like
Oh,
the ghost,
yeah.
like the big bad wolf type like character. Like, oh, when you say El Cucuy in Spanish, it's like, oh no, he's gonna come get me. Yeah, I'm curious to see who he is and
Mm-hmm.
why he has he doesn't even talk to his own father. So I'm curious to see why he doesn't talk to Pops almost.
Yeah.
What happened there, that dynamic?
And then too, I'd like to see if we get more about Eric's dad, because again, they kept alluding to the fact of Eric, you don't want to end up like your dad, which is always a negative tone. It's always like assumed that something bad happened to him. So, are we assuming that he's in jail, dead, missing? Like what is it about Eric's dad that we don't want Eric to end up like?
Yeah, and you know what I struggled a little bit with, and I'm still very confused, and maybe you can clarify this because maybe other people who watch this might feel the same way, is Anna's mom, Beatrice. Like,
Mm.
what is she? Is she Pops's daughter? Like, I didn't really feel that way.
I didn't feel that way either. I thought so. The first time I watched it, I didn't actually piece it together. But this time watching it, I thought, I wonder if maybe she's the daughter-in-law, and maybe Pops had like 3 kids, all boys, and each one of the grandkids is one of their kids, because they
Yeah.
make a very clear distinction in one of the episodes that Anna and Eric are cousins,
Yeah.
because somebody said something to him and he's like, "Fool, that's my cousin." So it's like, okay, there's that. But then when they're at the art gallery for Anna's show, they don't interact like father-daughter do, you
Yeah.
know?
So I'm curious, maybe they'll shed a light on that in season 2,
Yeah.
hopefully. Just to understand that dynamic. Seems like they all have a really good relationship, though, I will say that.
Yeah. Which is what I love. I love shows that do have a very strong family. And we've talked about this offline, like your family's really close, my family's really close. So I have a hard time when television shows, and I know that's not everybody's story. I recognize that now that I'm older, but I do find that it makes me happy when they show non-traditional type scenarios, like in this sense, like Eric's dad's not in the picture, Chris has a broken relationship with his dad, and then the situation between Anna and her mom, but there's still a strong family bond. So it's showing that, like, yes, there's a strong family bond, but it doesn't look traditional in the sense of mom and dad are happily married and all the kids are happily married and everyone's happy in their houses with their picket fences. So I really appreciate when that is represented. Like, this isn't a normal unit, but we're still very close and family's still very important.
Yeah, and you know what? They also highlight grief and the loss of Mama Fina, and that it's a constant struggle for families. I like that because it's like the family, although they, like you said, they're all walks of life, they're all doing different things. They grieve together.
Mhm.
They, maybe in their own ways, but they're a unit, and I think it makes it more relatable. Families that struggle and that they're that's okay. It's like you said, it's not the white picket fence family. Like, even within our conversations, yes, we're very close to our families, but we have our flaws,
Mhm.
and our families have their flaws, and but you can still be close,
Mhm.
and that's what I like, and it's okay if you're not close and there's reasons why, but at least this show will highlight that maybe there's things that you can work past, and be a unit, and even from afar.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh man. Will you come back after season 2 airs to talk about it with me?
Yes, yes. I'm excited for season 2. 2021, we're here.
Yes, like give
I
it to
know
us
I'm
already.
excited
Yeah.
to watch it. Yeah, I definitely would love to come back and talk about season 2.
Oh man, that makes me happy. I really appreciate your time and you coming in today to talk about this. I feel like each episode could be its own conversation separately, because like I said, with like the Grapevine episode with the mariachi band, there's so much packed in each episode.
Yeah, and it's 30 minutes, and you're like, wow, it was loaded.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, it's your host, Julia. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for sticking around. If you enjoyed this episode about Gentefied, share this episode with your friends. Send them a text, send them a link to the episode. If you send it to 2 or 3 people who will listen, and then we can all have a conversation about this show, that'd be really cool. Thanks for tuning in, y'all.